poured out the excess oil that accumulated in the valve ports of this power angle block. Quite a bit of gunk came out of that hole for the pilot check valve. Let's clamp this back in before we change positions to remove these couplers. And we're going to remove the pump relief valve here. This is a very important part of this unit. The actual pump inside the E-60 is capable of, I believe, 5,000 psi. The top cap on the reservoir will blow off at 3,000 psi. So it's very important that this is adjusted properly. So when we remove this, we need a 1-inch socket, I believe, to remove this nut. Yeah. I'm going to retrieve that. Actually, I have to get this wrench right here. Yeah, because it shouldn't be too tight. It's just a cover. It's not really holding anything. This is just a cap. But again, this is another place that people think that they need to add oil because it looks like a fill cap, and it's not. So we'll remove this. And what people do is they remove this cap. And a little bit of oil is okay. That's why it has an O-ring seal on it, because it might weep a little oil. And what they do, they see this giant set screw. And they don't realize what it does. Well, this is the adjustment screw. And they back this out, and then they realize there's a spring and a ball underneath it, and they can't pour oil in here, and then they put it back. And they put it back in the wrong position. Then they hop in their truck, and they go to raise the blade, and boom, the top cap blows to pieces. So it's very important that when you remove this, what we do, and I'll show you right now, you need a large screwdriver for this. And what we do is we turn it in first, and we count the number of turns. That's a half. That's 1 1/2. 2 1/2. It's 2 1/2. Okay. Now we'll back this out all the way. Put it in our parts bin. Grab our magnetic pickup tool. Remove the spring. And you can see this is a very heavy spring because it's holding back a lot of pressure. Put that in our parts bin. And down inside of here is another ball. This is why I say that large sheet of cardboard where you're laying your parts out, this would be a good time to use that if you're not familiar with these units, because the ball that goes in here is a different size diameter than the ball that goes in here. And you'll see in a moment also there's another ball underneath this. It's the pilot check ball that's on the bottom, and that's a different size as well. You don't want to confuse them because if you put them back in the wrong place, the pump won't function properly. So let's see about removing this now as long as we're here. And for this, again, we need our 1/4 inch Allen. And what we'll do is we'll try for fit. See if it wants to go in. This one really doesn't. So we get our hammer. Give it a little tap to make sure that it's fully seated. Because this is an expensive little plug and you don't want to chew it up if you don't have to. These can be pretty tight too. The reason for this is it's a steel plug. This is an aluminum block, and they're dissimilar metals. And sometimes you get that natural electrolysis / welding process that occurs. Okay, that one cracked loose pretty easily. Now, like I said, there's a pilot check ball and a spring in here. We're probably going to get a little drip of oil out of here, not much. Remove this slowly. And there's our ball and spring. The ball goes in first, the spring goes in second. I don't know if you can see that. You put these to the side in our little parts can. Again, if you're not familiar, you haven't done this before, you You got your big sheet of cardboard or your piece of paper, or I don't know how you want to lay it out, but you could lay your parts out, and this way you know exactly what goes back in here. Handy little tool that's free, especially for us because we go through so much. You make brake parts cleaner. Little caps. What we could do is we could take the plug from the bottom of here and put the plug in here with the spring and with the ball and put it to the side. Then we know those are together. We could take the spring and the ball from this bypass. We could take the ball and spring from this pressure relief valve for the pump and put it in one of these caps and put it to the side. And we know that it all goes together when we reassemble. So there's different ways you can do it. Okay? Let's see. Here we have two pipe plugs. Let's see if we can get this out of the way. We have two pipe plugs here. One of these is the lower adjustment screw, and the other one is a filter. So we're going to remove the filter first and see what kind of debris we have in there. These are removed using an 11/16 socket or wrench. We use wrenches most of the time for this type of task. These shouldn't be too tight, but oftentimes they are. And again, we'll use our mallet. It's just easier. You don't get as many busted knuckles when you're using a mallet. You just give it a little tap and it breaks free instead of exerting a lot of force and catching yourself on one of these sharp edges. So, and again, this has an O-ring on it, so sometimes the O-ring wants to hold when the plug's coming out, and you'll work it back and forth as you're removing it, and that'll free up the O-ring sometimes. Okay, we got that loose. Swing this back around so you can see. You usually get a little fluid out, not much. And just see a little drip. Put our drain plug in our parts can. And usually you need a needle nose plier on most of the units, but this one here you can almost get it with your fingers. And then now you see the water come out. This filter's not too bad. Pretty clean overall. Put that in our parts can. Now we're going to crack the drop speed adjustment screw plug. When we remove this plug, behind here is a set screw that adjusts the drop speed on the E-60 unit. Maybe I should mention that we have quite a bit of speedy dry down here on the floor to catch any drips in this area because we constantly rebuild pumps. So we just keep the floor covered in this immediate area with speedy dry to catch any of this oil that may be dripping. And as necessary, we replace it with fresh speedy dry. Okay. It's very common to get a little drip of oil out of here as well. You may want to note that when you make adjustments, drop adjustment screw, you need to make your adjustment, replace the plug, test your drop speed, remove the plug, make your adjustment, replace the plug, test your drop speed, because if you drop it with this plug removed, you're going to get a shot of oil out of this port. And it's very difficult to see inside there, but you use a 3/16 Allen key. A lot of gunk in there. Use a 3/16 Allen key. Make your adjustments. Oftentimes from the factory, these will have Loctite on the threads of the lower adjustment screw, so it may be difficult to turn at first, but once you crack it free, you put it where you want it. And drop speed is usually a matter of personal preference. Some guys like it to bang when it hits the ground, and some guys are happy when it cushions itself on the way down. I was going to try to get a shot of that lower adjustment screw, but it's pretty far in there. The lighting's not exactly the best, so we'll hold off on that. I'm going to pour off some of the oil that's in this drain pan. If I knock it over, it won't be the first time. So experience has taught me the less oil that's in this pan most of the time, the better off I am. All right. Now, let's Let's reposition this unit. Actually, I think I'd be better off with it sideways for you. We're going to be turning this way to remove this coupler. So we don't need our drain pan just yet. Put that to the side. We've been needing that for a while. We got most of the oil out. There's another filter here. And we'll get that after we crack this coupler loose. I don't like to use the mallet method, so to speak, with this, but sometimes if you can't get it, okay, that cracked loose fairly easily. We've been known to use a mallet before. Not the best choice because I'm always afraid I'm going to snap off this elbow in the valve block, and that would make a lot of unnecessary work for me, removing the broken piece. And this valve block is a very expensive piece to replace. In fact, this valve block is not available as a new assembly. I'd have to buy one of the modern valve blocks and convert the whole unit over. Now we're getting a little oil out here. That fitting is allowing air in because it's loose. So most of it went on our wrench. But again, I'd rather have a little spill than a big spill from the drain pan getting knocked over, so usually don't leave it there. I just noticed something out here, and I'll clean it up and I'll read it to you. Now right on here, on this ball type male coupler, which we don't use, we don't like the ball type couplers. Meyer stopped using them years ago. However, they're still out there in the aftermarket world, and they're priced right, so to speak, so a lot of guys will buy them. Well, something interesting. This one says 1/4 inch NPT, which is National Pipe Thread. And then after that it says 3,000 PSI max. 3,000 PSI max. What's the problem with that? 3,000 PSI is an awful lot of pressure, isn't it? Yes, it is. Well, here's the problem. Your crossover relief valve pressure is set at 3,800 PSI, plus or minus 50. Therefore, when you strike an object with your blade angled and it tries to come the opposite way and the fluid passes through this crossover relief valve, it's not going to even start to pass through this until the pressure is at 3,800 PSI. This cheap aftermarket coupler is only rated at 3,000 PSI. A couple of different things can happen. The ball may not be able to take the pressure, and as the fluid flows through under that high pressure, the ball will seat itself and lock the valve, basically turn itself into a check valve and lock the fluid from being able to pass through, and your cylinder will split. You'll get a big crack in the side of your angle ram and you'll say, geez, that's a piece of junk. Well, it's not. You put on a cheap coupler. So that's why it's best to always go with OEM if you can, or equivalent. Now, just because it fits doesn't mean it's equivalent, as you can see. It looks exactly the same as the old Meyer couplers. It fits, but it's not rated at nearly the same amount of pressure. So I'll recommend to the customer that that be replaced. Now we'll remove our elbow. Okay, we'll get those drips again. Before the elbow, maybe we should remove this female coupler on the other half of the here. So let's see. And this one happens to be 7/8, all different brands. This one says in very large letters on it, 3,000 PSI max. And after I remove this, I'll actually hold it up for the camera so you can see. Maybe we have to give this one a shot. Make it free. This one I can see sealing on the threads. And this one you can see something that's a pretty big no-no when it comes to hydraulic systems such as this. Teflon tape. You can see this Teflon tape on these threads. Not something you want to use with a hydraulic system because this Teflon tape gets into threads, and as you tighten it down, it can work its way into your hydraulic system. And on this particular unit, there is no filter screen for the pickup side of the pump, where it draws in the fluid it's going to put under pressure for operation of the unit. On the E-47, excuse me, actually I happen to have a couple of them here. Here's a filter screen. I've actually had them come in where there's a large piece of Teflon tape just stuck to the side here, and it actually starts to clog the screen, and then the pump's starving for fluid. So the further you keep that Teflon away from your hydraulic system, the better off you are. Instead, you want to use a liquid pipe dope. I won't mention any brands, but use something that's rated for what they call WOG, water, oil, or gas. You want something that's listed for the pressure that you're going to be working with. And I've had a salesperson come in here and try to sell me a product that they have for sealing threads, and it was, I believe, rated at 2,000 psi. And I mentioned that the product I use when sealing threads is actually rated for 10,000 psi. Yes, it's overkill. It's not any more expensive than the other stuff. It's just a better sealant. So now that we have this cleaned up, and there's an excessive amount of, you guessed it, Teflon tape on these threads as well. So we're going to get that off with our trusty pick, because we don't want that Teflon anywhere near our hydraulic system. Doesn't make exactly the best seal, and in addition, it's just going to clog things up. There it is. Okay, let's see if I can clean this off. Nice shiny brand new coupler. Yep, certainly is. I don't know if you can make it out. 3,000 psi max. Not something you want to use on a system that's going to exceed that pressure. So, now that we have our couplers removed, we start with the tall elbow, because if we tried to remove the short elbow, it would hit the tall elbow. So you always remove the tall elbow first. So that's what we're going to do. Typically the 11/16 fits. This one it doesn't, so we're going to use the 3/4 to remove this. Sometimes these are really tight, sometimes they're not, because people have a tendency to stop tightening them when they're lined up where they want them to be, which sometimes is okay depending on how snug it actually is. Other times you'll stop where you want it to be, especially without any kind of sealant on the threads, and it'll leak. And that's not what we want. So this is an awkward angle with this. I could come from the other side as well. First, let's snug this unit down, this vise pivoting. If I come this way, I'm going towards the unit. Okay. Once it's cracked free, it's easier to turn it from this side, unless you can see what I'm doing a little better. And then we'll back this out. And you can see here there's not a lick of sealant on these threads whatsoever. These are pipe threads. Pipe threads are meant to have a sealant on them. This is one of these OEM Meyer caps, dust cover, whatever you want to call it, for this female half of the coupler. Over the years they get hard and they don't seal very well. So what we do with these is, you guessed it, cut them off and toss them. We have nice new rubber ones that we put on, very flexible. They work a lot better at keeping out the dirt and debris. Move our short coupler with our large one out of the way. It's easy to remove. And again, I think you're going to find not a lick of sealant on the threads. Needless to say, when this is reassembled, there will be plenty of sealant on the threads. Now we're going to move on to our filter here. Kind of in a difficult spot. I want you to be able to see. I don't want to have to reposition the unit, but I guess I will. So we got our other filter in there. First we'll crack this loose. Okay. Same thing, we have our O-ring seal here. Judging from the amount of rust on the bottom side of this plug, it hasn't been removed in quite some time. I believe the owner, I think I said it before, but maybe I didn't. In case I didn't, I believe the owner said it's been 4 years since he did anything with this pump. Which would make sense considering the date on that C valve was 2003. And this O-ring is seated pretty tight against the face of the block. So we'll try working this in and out, see if we can free it up. If not, we're going to have to use the wrench to take it out the whole way and reinstall the O-ring, or in this case we'll probably replace the O-ring because it's not coming free and it's probably going to be damaged when we remove this plug. When this is installed on the truck, keep in mind this one's actually in the back. So the access to this one's limited. In fact, some owners may not even know that it's there. So that could be a reason why this hasn't been removed in all that time. Right. A little harder to get at. So we'll grab our needle nose pliers. Grab our drain pan, even though half of the stuff leaked out already. And we'll pluck this filter. Now, this is the pressure filter. This is the pressure, high pressure port. There's a whole lot of debris in there. And you can see here in the filter, a little piece of green something or other. A lot of little pieces of metal. Quite a bit of sludge and gunk. It's not plugged up, but it was doing its job. Gives you a little bit of an indication of what's flowing through the pump while it's running. And there's quite a bit of metal here. See if I can smear it. Maybe you can see the sparkles. A lot of metal shavings right here. That's not good, obviously. See them any better now. There's quite a bit of metal shavings there. We'll blow these out with compressed air when we go to reassemble, and you'll see that. And there's also this fuzzy stuff, for lack of a better term, which is actually little bits of the packing of the power angle rams. Not uncommon, especially if that filter hasn't been removed in as long a period of time as I think. Probably going all the way back to when it was new. More of this green stuff. Not really sure what it is. Maybe we can grab another piece of it with our trusty pick. Excuse me. And hold it up for you to see. Whatever it is, it's kind of soft. But it's a bright green color. Almost looks like silicone. Same silicone that's used on the motor mounting plate seal. As you can see right here, there it is, dead match. Here it is on the probe, and here it is here. So it won't damage anything. It's very soft, and the gears of that pump will grind it up like there's no tomorrow, so without damaging anything. It's just amazing how a little piece of debris or whatever it is gets into the system, and it works its way through and gets caught somewhere. And you can see there's quite a bit more in there. We'll get that out when we flush this unit completely. Okay? Next, pour off our excess solid and fluid that came out of there. Like I say, over and over, the less oil that's in that pan when it gets knocked over, the better. Clean up our mess a little bit here. These are recycled towels. Try not to waste them here in the shop, so when I dry my hands with these towels, I'll let them dry and then I reuse them as rags here when I'm rebuilding the units. These paper towels can get real expensive when you're dealing with this much oil, but they're still cheaper than those red rags you see in all the mechanic shops and gas stations and repair shops, so we'll keep using them. We buy them in bulk at a warehouse type big box store. Alright, we're not going to do the pump just yet. We're going to remove the angle block. We're going to cross our fingers because sometimes they're real bare to get off. The worst one I ever had, I actually had to bring it to the machine shop next door and have them mill the heads off the bolts. So we're hoping that's not what's going to happen here today. And we start out with our probe, pick, whatever you want to call it. We go in here, and these are Allen heads, again, 1/4 inch. So we get in there and root around, make sure that there's no debris around the heads of the Allen bolts here, and get into them. Quite often you'll find mud daubers or wasps have packed these things solid with mud, I guess to lay their eggs. It's not unusual, so I just want to make sure you got everything all cleaned up there. Now, because we're taping this for you guys, I don't have the compressor on. In fact, I'm doing this in the evening. I would take compressed air normally, keep it right here, nice and handy on my flexible hose, and I would blast out these holes and make sure I got all the debris out before I do this. However, I can feel with the probe that there's not much debris in there. So, put our trusty 1/4 inch Allen socket in there. Now these I like to seat. As you can see, you got a lot of play here. I like to seat these. You still may have a lot of play, but I like to make sure that they can fully seat before I try to crack these free. This is a big cross your fingers kind of deal. And there's been times where they're not coming free. So we've actually left them alone. Unless it's absolutely imperative to remove them because, as I mentioned before, this is an expensive part. Last time I attended Meyer service school, actually, yeah, this one's not coming apart. I wish I could show you guys, but for what it is, it's not worth it. Nope. At service school, they had discussed the nature of these, the C's in place. And what they often do is, being that, well, before, when this was still available, this is a $500 item, and this is about between $150 and $200 item. So rather than destroy this, you get yourself a Sawzall, and you'd cut the base right in half. Cut this portion of the base off to get your angle block off in one piece and reuse it. And you would replace the base. Really, like I say, it's not imperative that it comes off. We usually do remove it with all our rebuilds, unless it's that difficult to get off, then it's just not worth it. Because we're either going to strip the bolts, we're going to break the socket, or we could even break one of the bolts off, and then we have to get all of them out. In that case, if we snap one, so some things are just better left alone. And I believe I have a valve block here. I can show you guys what it looks like when it's removed. Actually, this one's all cleaned up. I don't want to get my grubby hands on it. Let's see, I think I got a few of them here. Parts. I'm going to go get one, so we'll pause because I'm running out of time and tape here. Actually, I'll remove these greasy gloves and I'll show you one here that's been removed. This one's all cleaned up. We got a little oil seeping out of here. Not much. We didn't blow this out yet, but we removed all the paint. This one's going to be repainted. It's going on a rebuild that we're working on right now. And you can see on this one, the crossover relief valve's already been removed. And we've got a little bit of corrosion around these here recesses. But this is what it looks like when it's removed. On the back side, there's 3 ports. And that's where your fluid flows through. So, there is a check valve built into the block for the C valve. Now you notice where that the B valve had that ball and spring. That was the check valve for the B. The check valve for the C is built into the block, which is why at times you'll have a problem. If you look at the Meyer troubleshooting guide, it'll tell you to replace the power angle block. Usually that's because that C check valve failed. Something that we found over the years, and I don't know if it's accurate, but it sure seems to be accurate, is if you shake this block, you'll hear the C check valve rattling. On valve blocks we've had that were bad, if you shook the block, you would not hear the rattle. So let's see. I don't know if you can hear that little jingle. That's the check valve. Okay, I think we reached a good stopping point for this evening, considering it's a little after 2 a.m. Okay, we're going to do a more thorough cleaning of the exterior of this unit around the pump relief valve, the A valve, and the ABC. We're going to clean this whole area up because we're going to be reinserting the valve soon. We want this to be clean. So we're going to end up going through quite a bit of brake cleaner in this process. We don't usually use a degreaser tank in this shop because we do a lot of welding, and there's really no place safe to have a degreaser that'll do a thorough job without having to worry about the fact that the solvent in it is flammable. So what we do have is an Aqueous parts washer, and it really doesn't do a very good job of removing this grime. In fact, I'm sorry I bought it, but that's another story. So let's clean this down a little and see where we're at. Maybe we'll take another stab at getting that angle block off. Like I said, it's not imperative, but I like to do it because it's never going to get easier. It's only going to get more difficult over time. So, like I said before, most solvents that you'll use, brake cleaners and whatnot, will remove the paint or soften it. So, it's an inherent problem with the cast aluminum. I think I mentioned it already, but I'll say it again. Cast aluminum, or aluminum for that matter, is not easy to paint because the proper primer is highly toxic and not readily available in this country anymore. There's some that'll do the job. I shouldn't say it's not readily available. It's just really looked down upon in some states especially. For instance, as I mentioned, this brake cleaner that I'm using here is mostly acetone. The one that I'd like to use is actually ethanol. And for some strange reason, in this state, New Jersey, you can't buy it. It's not available for sale because there's something to do with some Air Act, Clean Air Act. And I just don't understand that alcohol is somehow worse than acetone, but it is somehow. So, it's beyond me as to why. Like I said, you can see most of the paint's just coming right off of this unit. The main reason being that all the solvents soften the paint. That was the great thing about the ethanol. I actually got some to try, not knowing that you weren't allowed to buy it or sell it in this state. unknowingly I got some of it, and once I got it, I found on the container that it's not for sale, and it actually had a name for the group of states that New Jersey's part of, where it's not available. So, very disappointing. Like I say, now let's take another stab at it. Maybe we can get this angle block off. So, let's get rid of our solvent, because again, the less that's in the pot, the less mess when I knock it over. So, that's our shop cat. Seems to have something to say about what I'm doing here. I'm going to try with the socket, see if I can break this loose a little. I highly doubt it's going to work, but what I'm going to do too is grab a ratchet that's a little bit longer. See if that makes a difference. Boy, those are in there pretty good. They just do not want to come out. I actually had one of these that I brought next door to the machine shop and had them mill the heads off the bolts. Which was a little bit unusual. That the outcome of that was, let's see if I have some here. This is one of the bolts. And they really don't go in very far, maybe 3/8 of an inch into the base. And what happens is, this part here, these threads load up with corrosion, and it corrodes solid around the head. And that's why you can't turn them. Usually where they're threaded in, the threaded portion that's actually screwed in, isn't the problem. It's all that corrosion on the rest of the bolt. So, I guess we're going to skip past that. I can't seem to break it loose. Like I say, it's not imperative, but I'd really like to get it off. So, excuse me. This unit's got quite a bit of rust on this motor pump shaft. The area that we're concerned with is the area where the seal makes contact with the shaft. I think I mentioned that once before, but unfortunately the only way I could do this video for you is to come here in the evenings, where it's quiet, the phone's not ringing, and nobody's coming in, no disturbances, no loud noises. So I kind of lose track, because it's over the course of a few days that I'm doing this. And there's so much going on right now with the season approaching that I'm just so busy my brain is mush at times. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself. Okay, we're going to use a 9/16 socket to remove these two bolts. Our shop cat apparently agrees. Could have sped things up if I had the socket handy, but I don't use a 9/16 very often here. These bolts have tooth washers under the heads. I don't know if you can hear that background noise, that's the hot water heater. You can see the gook on these. So clean these up before we put them in our parts can. I'm just using my fingers with this socket. This is the pump mounting plate. It's still stuck to the pump. And look at all that junk. Boy, that's gunked up good, isn't it? Just sludge. Globs and globs of it. You can see there's a groove machined in this for an O-ring, obviously. That's not used in this particular application. This is the O-ring that's used in this application. You see it's oval shaped, but you'll soon see that when it comes new, it's round, and you've got to squeeze it into that cavity. Just want to get all this junk off of this. This I'm actually going to put out of view. I don't want to put it in with the parts can, and I don't want to set it down where there's any debris on the bench. Clean off our motor mounting plate. Which is also gunked up pretty good. What I'm going to do is set that over to the side where I put the pump. And our other bolt was laying down here in the solvent. So that's fairly clean. We'll put that in with the parts. Now we'll blast this real quick now. A lot of gook down in there. There's that pump check valve. And that's the pump locator pin I just blasted the gunk off of. Look at all that, huh? That pump check valve usually pops out at an inopportune time, like right now, hits you in the chest or goes shooting across the shop. You can see it right here. I'm going to remove this O-ring, and once I remove the O-ring, it's going to be free. I'm going to try to hook it with my pick. Pop it out. Kind of difficult to do while making sure that you can still see what's going on here, but there's the O-ring, and there's a spring behind it and a ball. And here's the spring. Put that in our parts can, or you could lay it on your cardboard if that's what you're using. Here's the seat. It's got a groove machined around the one end of it. That's where the O-ring sits on there, and the ball makes contact with the back of it. Needless to say, there's quite a few of them on the floor here in the shop somewhere. I never did find them. You don't always sweep regularly. Somehow they just find a place, a little nook or cranny, and they disappear. And here's the ball. Nice and clean. We'll put that in our parts bin, or parts can. And I'm going to tip this down. You won't be able to see so well, but I got to get more of this junk out of here. nice. It's all lined up. Get an angle on here. So the junk runs out into the can, or my pot. And I tip it because there's solvent accumulated on the inside down inside here, and I want to get that out. Still quite a bit of junk in there too, so. All right, what's next? Well, we can take a Scotch-Brite pad, clean some of this off, some of this buildup, and we reassemble it. Reservoir, tank, can, whatever you want to call it, slides right on there. And this is pretty tough, this corrosion. See it? A lot of it you got to scrape off. You can't just use an abrasive pad. There's quite a bit of it on there. And as I say, you know, when you're doing one of these rebuilds, this is the time to do this type of thing, because you don't know when you're going to have it open again, and it's not going to go away. It's just going to build up even more, make it even more difficult for yourself or the next guy to get that tank off. I mean, you saw what kind of a time we had getting this one off, so just something to keep in mind. Pretty heavy. See some of them coming off in large chunks here. Try not to get into this groove here too much unless it's nice and holding the screwdriver nice and flat, because you don't want to damage the groove. And once you put the tank back on, the O-ring may leak. If you have a somewhat soft wheel, maybe a brass wire wheel for your cordless drill, you can work at this with that. Brass and aluminum are pretty close as far as hardness. You don't want to remove any aluminum. We're just trying to knock the corrosion off the surface here. So I'm using the screwdriver to control which way the flat's facing and not gouge this aluminum. Alright, try back our Scotch-Brite abrasive pad. Sometimes I get Scotch-Brite, sometimes they're just abrasive pads. Now we'll go back into this O-ring groove and make sure that's clean. Usually the top side of it's not bad, it's the bottom. Just want to make sure that our O-ring is able to seat in there, and we're not going to have problems when it comes time to seal up. I'm not putting you to sleep watching this here. I just don't want to miss anything, because the whole reason to buy an instructional aid, or whatever you want to call it, for rebuilding one of these units is to get all the little tidbits that you don't know, that somebody who does this all the time knows. So I'm just trying to impart some of this wisdom. You could always fast forward if it's boring you. But I just want to show you how we do a thorough job, so you can do a thorough job yourself when you're rebuilding your own. It's not that I just like to hear myself talk. Okay, so clean this off, see what it looks like. Okay, looking pretty good. All right. One of the things I do on every unit that comes in here is I chase threads with a bottom tap. Well, actually, this isn't a bottom tap, but with a tap. And this is where the ground bolt goes. And it's a notorious location for corrosion. So we're really not trying to cut threads, we're just trying to cut the calcium and the buildup of corrosion out of the threads. So that the ground bolt, when we install it, which will be a brand new one, makes good contact, and we get a good ground here. So that's the only reason for running this in here. And no, we don't use any oil. Not that we're trying to cut threads, but if we were trying to cut threads in aluminum, you're supposed to do it dry. I may have read somewhere at one time about using chalk, but we'll see. Alright. Usually it's easier to do this with the valve block removed, but since we can't seem to break it free, we're going to tear into my least favorite part of rebuilding any of these pumps. Let's get rid of our solvent here. Shop cat agrees with me, I guess. This is going to be the least favorite part that we're going to get into. Probably a part that scares you. And that's the crossover relief valve. 13/16 wrench. This cap shouldn't be too tight. Like I said, it shouldn't be. Doesn't mean that it won't be. This cap has an O-ring underneath it. Excuse me. That makes a seal because sometimes the crossover's been known to weep a little oil, which is normal. As they say in the shop manual, if it is weeping oil, don't try to tighten that nut anymore, because it's not unusual for it to weep. So, all right. There's a lot of pieces to this. Let's see here. 3/8. This outer hex nut is the adjuster. We don't need to remove the adjuster. We can leave it right where it is. We're going to unscrew the whole valve. We're just grabbing two flats on the side of this barrel. I forget exactly what it's called, but we'll just call it the barrel. And there's a spring inside. Looky here. There's our spring. Alright? You can see this end of it right here. That would be because the other half of it, a piece of it, is stuck inside of here. There's one broken crossover relief valve spring. Now, also inside here is our disc. Just a flat little disc. So, what I like to do with the crossover, even though I know where everything goes on these, is I save all these caps from the brake cleaner. Just for stuff like this. Aerosol can would work just the same. Put my pieces in here. Even my broken pieces in this case. Now, where's my needle nose? You stay over there, buddy. Buddy cat. All right. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen that way. But here's another piece of that crossover. Put it in our can lid. Here's a washer. Looks almost like a rivet on a pair of jeans. Put that in there. Now, this comes the fun part. There's really no way I could show you, I don't think, but there's a sleeve in here. And there's a barrel. We got to pluck it out. So, if you look at the back of your Meyer service manual, or you're looking at it as a PDF, you'll see they tell you how to make a tool for pulling out this crossover relief valve. Here's one we made. I don't know if this one's going to do it, but you got to get in there. Down in the bottom, there's holes in the sides of this. You got to catch it in one of these holes. Here's the barrel. See? Put that in our lid. Here's a washer. And it's got a raised portion on one side and flat on the other. And then here's our nylite washer. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Here's our nylite washer. During reassembly, you'll see how we get that in there. Right now, it's just garbage. Now I got to see if I can hook this quill here. Well, actually, it's not a quill, but the barrel section. And pluck it out without damaging the threads. Now, we got an O-ring. That come out. All right. This is why it's so much fun putting these back in. To this day, I have the manual in front of me when I'm doing it. Take this over to the grinder and get a little bit of an edge on it. I got a bunch of these tools laying around, and this one here seems to be one that got used the most because it's a little worn down. May have to go get another one. I can't get it with this. Yeah, it doesn't seem to want to grab. Well, here's one right here. This one's got a little bit more of a hook on it. Let's see if I can get it with this. There it is. And boy, look at the junk on that, huh? See, it's got 4 holes in it to allow the fluid to flow from one angle ram over through this crossover valve, out the elbow to the other angle ram when the plow stretches an obstruction and needs to cross over. So, and we have another O-ring. And there should be one more all the way down to the bottom there, and it's not easy to get. Yeah, little one. It's a little guy. That's one of the reasons I got all this spare MIG wire up here. Comes in real handy for stuff like this. Just a piece of MIG welding wire. Just bend a little hook on the end here. Get that in there. Pluck out this O-ring. There it is. Okay. So our entire crossover relief valve is now removed. We're going to put these parts over here in a safe place where we won't knock them over and lose any. If we did, it wouldn't be the first time. We're human. Loosen the vise. Swing it back around this way a little. Put our 3/8 back so we know where it is. Tip our pump sump base here down on an angle. Clean out this cavity. Okay, well, needless to say, there's quite a bit of junk in all these valve openings here, so we're going to have to tip this up and clean them out real good. So let's do that now.